Um, I'm going to open up the PowerPoint right now and just kind of like explain to you guys what we're going to be going over today. And then if anybody has any questions that's on this meeting, just maybe let's have them in the chat. And then after everybody's talking, they can like look in the chat and see if there are any like specific questions to everybody. But I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen so we can get started right now. Okay, and then are you guys able to see my screen? It's the PowerPoint. Yes, perfect. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming to the meeting. Again, I apologize, I was a couple minutes late, but we got everything figured out. And if you are not speaking, I'm just going to ask you to not have your microphone, have your microphone muted, just in case there's like background noise or anything like that. But so we'll get on with the presentation. This is the intern experience that ASLA has put together this year, and we have 4 speakers. One of them is myself, and then I'll just have everybody else introduce themselves. But so what does it mean to be an intern? I had looked this up on the internet, and basically Google gave this to me. I mean, that's where you find the best answers to everything, right, Google? So an intern is a student or a trainee who works sometimes without pay at a trade or occupation in order to gain work experience. Now I wanted to like find out what that really meant for landscape architecture, and so I actually looked up a landscape architecture internship, and these are some of the characteristics they had listed under that internship, and I just thought they were like a good reference point. And you might see a couple of these themes highlighted in some of the work that our students are showing. So first, we are going to start off with Haley. And Haley, you have 3 slides, so just let me know when you're ready to go on to the next one. And I'll let you introduce yourself, and I'm gonna mute myself now.
Okay. I'm Haley Bartlett. I'm a 5th-year landscape architecture student, and I've had 3 internships, and I tried on these slides to show when I did them and then how I was connected with the company. So the first internship I had was after 2nd year, and it was with a company called Space Landscaping, which is largely a maintenance company for downtown Vancouver in the Vancouver area. So they started as a small, like, kind of guy in a pickup truck with a horticulture degree and grew. So by the time I got to them, they are in charge of a lot of private properties that make up kind of the ecosystem of downtown. So basically think like large condos that to be competitive for a place to live in have to have these beautiful landscapes. So I spent a month in each of their departments. So the first month I was in maintenance. So I worked as if I had been hired by them as anyone else to do maintenance. So the first circle is just a picture. I was mowing the lawn that day, and that was like where I was at, which was really cool to be around like highly designed areas and understand things that are much more difficult to maintain than other things. And then I did a month in install, which has become really valuable now in interviews to say, yes, I did do just like paver install or paver repairs and some of that more construction side, even though it was small scale. Being able to say that in conversation and speak that language, even though it's just a little bit, has been valuable moving forward. So this is a picture of a rooftop. It was a landscape architect that spec'd having turf up there. There's a lot of green roofs on the West Coast, but it had failed. So we went up there to try to figure out something else to do. So that was just a picture of, I had on my phone from when we did the site visit. And then I did a month in design. So I worked under, the lead that I worked under was like the install lead, and his background was largely in civil engineering and masonry. So I didn't work with any landscape architects, but he had every landscape architecture book I'd ever seen in his bookshelf. So definitely valuable. And it was very design build like kind of go sketch out ideas, make a plan, go do it. But yeah, you can go to the next slide. So then after third year, so the fall of third year, I started working at Boyle Landscape Architects in town. This is largely residential and like housing development stuff, like smaller scale things. I worked there for over a year during the semester and then full time for a summer. And I really enjoyed it because it was so small. I had a lot of flexibility and okay, can we do things this way? Like this is kind of like Photoshop, watercolor, kind of got to be adventurous because there's no, in a small firm, there's not as much structure, which is obviously good and bad. So that's where I had fun with it, kind of being like, okay, this is on my to-do list. I want to try to do it this way. And then we did get to work a bit with Chris Hawley Architects, which is, they've recently changed their name to Craftwell, which is exciting and interesting to see that dynamic at a residential scale. And then this was like a cold call. I called him in high school and said, hey, what do I need to do by the time I need an internship? Like what would make you hire me? And then he needed an intern and had remembered that and contacted me. So it was a very kind of like who you know situation, but pretty small scale in Fargo. You can go to the next one. And then this last summer, I did an internship with Kinley Horn and Associates through their Raleigh office. So obviously the summer was a little weird. So the internship was shortened to a month and it was entirely virtual. So the job turned into a lot of job shadowing, kind of one-on-one virtual meetings like this. Kind of what do you do? Why do you like your job? Do you like working at Kinley Horn? Those kinds of things, especially as I'm coming up on graduating, looking forward to, okay, what kind of setting do I want to work in? It was interesting to hear other people's paths. They did facilitate like a design competition, which was with other interns in like the water management, traffic engineering departments, which was really fun. And we all think very differently. So it was interesting. Like, of course, I love collaborating with students within NDSU, but it was speaking a different language to talk to people about in other departments, even students. And then I did have a bit of a Photoshop assignment from one of the lead landscape architects, basically to prove that I could do something with Photoshop because the setting's obviously weird and I wasn't actually doing any billable work. So that's like the circle to the far right. Yeah, those are my experiences. They've all been kind of very different, but yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. So I have a question for you. 2 of your internships were not in Fargo. And so I just am curious, like, where did you live? How did you, like, did the company help you figure that out? Or were you, like, having to figure that out on your own? Like, how did that work out?
Yeah, so specifically the Vancouver one was kind of like a stars aligned situation because I went to a career fair and it was with Horticulture Club, like NDSU Horticulture Club, but it was kind of a standard career fair. I had like a design competition and we kind of, I ended up talking to the owner of the company, which is kind of like a surprise, like that was an unknown. And we basically like hit it off just conversationally, like he didn't know where I went to school, I didn't know where he worked. But then I did well in one of the competitive events, so that's how they got my name. So they didn't even know my name until I had gone on stage. And then they had never had a US, Vancouver, Canada. I don't think I said that. Vancouver, Canada, not Washington. They had never had a US intern. So basically they said, hey, we want to make this happen. Like we want US students to see us as an internship opportunity. Do you want to be like our guinea pig kind of thing? And I said, sure. And so they provided an apartment for that situation. And I was with another intern, like we were shared an apartment kind of outside of Vancouver a little bit, but like could take bus to work basically. So that's how that worked, which is obviously like very, I don't know, I don't hear of that a lot, especially in cities. So that was basically just part of the compensation. And then Kinley Horn and Associates, so basically how they typically do it is they partner you up with other interns with similar budgets to find work or find a living situation of some kind. So that way you're not going in alone, which usually makes it less expensive. But because it was online, they didn't do any of that. But my partner lives in and goes to school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So that was something that I was pursuing that location because I knew I had a place to live, which is something I'd tried to do because living arrangements are kind of, especially for summer, so up in the air. So that's how those scenarios worked out.
I have a question for you.
Go for it.
So you said your first internship, you did a month of install and a month of design. Would you say that month of install was just as valuable as the design aspect, or should students just strictly be looking for design opportunities?
I don't know how to answer that because I know me being able to say, like, for instance, when I interviewed with Kinley Horn, it was much more competitive than the other internships that I had. It was the only competitive one that I actually got a response on, quite frankly. Like every other internship I'd applied for, they didn't even respond because I was not from North Carolina. But they told me, like looking back at the end of the internship when I asked them about it, that's something that matters to them because there are designers and there should be designers that are very practical and kind of really rely on that install experience. So I know looking forward, that's what got me further in the process with a different company. And I don't know, I think that's really valuable, especially second year when like the big name, like Kinley Horn doesn't hire second year students, right? Like that early in your education, usually you're not, there's kind of bullet points that say, these are the interns we want. And usually it's like juniors and seniors. So it's kind of a related, like very obviously related experience you can get that's not design, but it is like structural problem solving and it is like kind of learning the lingo, which I think is obviously important and we need to learn at some point. So yeah, I'd say it's good. It's like makes you a better designer and definitely a better applicant moving forward.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Haley. I'm sure we can come back to you if anybody has any other questions for you later on down the road, but let's move on with this presentation. The next person to present is Bennett, so you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, as Abby mentioned, my name is Bennett. I'm a fourth year, or just beginning my fourth year. I work at Confluence in Fargo. They're formerly known as Land Elements. They just, after the first of the year, we got purchased by a larger company, Confluence. So it's still like the same small office. If any of you guys were familiar with Land Elements in Fargo earlier, there's not that many, it's 4 people. So it's the same small office feel, but we have a lot more firepower in terms of resources to lean on if somebody has done something that we're doing that we need to learn from. They have I think they have 80 employees over 8 offices across the country. So there's really not a realm that they're not working in. So it's really nice to see not only the stuff that they're working on, but stuff that we can contribute to that company. So I'll just get started into some of the projects that I've worked on this summer. This right here, this image is a streetscape we're doing in West Fargo, or we just handed in. This project was, or the reason I asked Abby to include it in the presentation is because just based out of, I would say, lack of time or the necessity to learn other programs, AutoCAD kind of gets, we do spend some time developing our AutoCAD skills, but I think based off of like the real world application or some of the real world projects that I've done, it would be beneficial for students now or future students to spend a lot more time learning AutoCAD, or perhaps get an internship where you know it'll be you'll be doing some drafting, because unless you are in a large office where you are specifically a designer, you will be drafting the stuff that you design, and knowing how to do that efficiently will become really important. Some of the stuff that just based like in this picture that I did that are maybe some professional practices that maybe you will have to learn too in the future is the tables on the right. That's linking Excel to AutoCAD. The keynotes, that's also linking, are creating blocks, dynamic blocks, so you can edit from page to page. The joint lines I did, the annotations I did. A lot of the stuff that at least I do is taking our lead designers at our office and creating them, whether it be construction documents or renderings. You can go to the next slide. This picture's kind of blurry. Anyway, it's one of the first designs I got to do myself, or at least was like given sort of free rein with some critiques along the way, but it's a streetscape project in Detroit Lakes. They gave us this intersection and said that there's going to be a mini roundabout. And then the first thing that I thought of when I heard that was that I'd like to put some vegetation or some kind of key landmark in the roundabout. And then my boss came back to me and said that there can't be, just based off of turning radiuses and trucks, there can't be anything in that roundabout except for concrete. So then I came up with the design solution, which is a little bit hard to see right now, but it's a compass. And I really wanted to like enforce the lake and like I don't want to say nautical, because I don't want to act like that was like an overplayed thing, but it took a long time for me to get the compass rose to not look like kind of niche-y and like have some sophistication to it, and not have it look like I don't know, somebody's, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but it took a lot of design intent in terms to get the streetscape laid out correctly and get the elements the way I wanted to. And I was really pleasantly surprised when they went for my concept based off of those designs. So I would say this project was the first project that I got to conceptualize start to finish and really like put my spin on it. So that was something that I worked up to working at this office, and I was really happy with. You can go to the next one. And then the last project is a conceptual design for a natural playground, and then also some signage design concepts that I came up with for a city in Minnesota that's working on their parkway system. And the reason I included these two images, especially the one on the left, is it really expresses, especially in a small office, how you have to be sort of like a jack of all trades in terms of what you bring to the table, because the board that the graphic is on is something that I created. The watercoloring rendering and the annotations is something I did, and also is like the legend with the more of like the architectural lettering like kind of loose. So because this is a concept phase, so then like to create something that interprets the idea behind, or like the purpose behind this in like a loose format, or like this term, this time in the design phase is something that is really crucial, because you'd be surprised at what people, when they're critiquing, especially the public, are critiquing your designs or critiquing somebody's design, they'll get hung up on like a really small detail that may not even be pertinent in the design. So to create it to a level that people can generally understand the idea, but not have it so far developed that they start to question some of the elements, is like really tricky, and something that I've really had to deal with in the last summer. And then to answer that question, the line work was drawn by a designer And then I scanned it in and took the contour lines from AutoCAD and then brought that in and then watercolored it in Photoshop. And then the rest of it, the legend and all that stuff, I put in Illustrator. Yeah, and then that kind of wraps up my part of the presentation. If anybody has any more questions, I'd be willing to answer them.
I have a question for you. So I've seen, I think a good chunk of, or asked you a lot about this, but I'm not actually sure. How did you get like your foot in the door with this company? And then also, I know I'm pretty sure you had experience prior to this that's definitely related. I wasn't sure if it was education or if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, my first 2 years were in construction engineering at NDSU. I guess I didn't really get into it as far as past like generals. I just basically completed a lot of my generals, and then I did some surveying courses and stuff like that. I did also, before working at Confluence, build decks for a couple of years, so I got like a little bit of a residential design sense, or especially which backyards were more heavily designed than the others. But how I got my internship was actually like really, I think more of a testament to what you were talking about, Haley, and like this was the way I got my internship was kind of like a who you know kind of deal too. Dominic, one of the professors here, everybody knows who he is, used to consult at Land Elements, and then I was sitting, I did some research about the firms in Fargo, and then I realized that Land Elements was the largest, I think. I've just based on a lot of there are more firms in Fargo, but they are one or two guys or two or three guys. And I just happen to know also that Mike Allmendinger started that company and was also on the advisory board. So it's kind of like a culmination of things. I just started being class representative and just got introduced to Michael through the advisory board. And then I was also talking to Dominic about how he worked there. And then it just turned into one day after studio I was working, and Dominic's like, should we go talk to Michael? And I sat down and had a conversation with Michael, and I didn't really know at the time it was sort of like an interview. And after talking to him for like 10 minutes, and this is in the spring of the year, he's like, well, if you can start in a month, we'll hire you on, you can start. And that was, looking back at it now, it was really him taking a chance on me, because now talking to Brian, my boss, it was not like, I was kind of thrown into the office. It wasn't really like discussed between Brian, like that they'd be taking me on. And so I spent the summer really like learning a lot of stuff under Dominic. He advised me the most, but he was only there for a couple hours a week. So yeah, I really didn't have an interview or didn't like set up something, and it really was like me. I'm not gonna say I did a lot of homework, but it was truly like who you know, and like a lot of stuff just fell into place, which it's just hard to look back on it now, and it was really fortunate that all happened to happen, I guess. So I can look at the chat too.
Yeah, Bennett, I think there is one more question from Ben in the chat.
Oh yeah. So not often. Every once in a while, me and Austin, he's a fifth year also, he works at Confluence. Every once in a while, everybody will put in like a concept in the hat kind of, and we'll send up, like, we'll give them three, and three of us will design it, and they'll all be from individual people. The one on the left, Brad, the other employee at Confluence, he designed all the concepts. I just rendered them. But the signage on the right, we all came up with one, and mine won. I just figured that out the other week, or like last week. But usually we have like design threads where we all build off each other and then kind of create a concept based off that, or we all individually create one so they're really, really unique and really different. And especially when we're just coming up with the ones on the right, the signage design on the right, where form and everything can be like really loosely interpreted and the client doesn't even know really what they want. So we come up with stuff. And I wouldn't say it's not a competition. I don't think like we're not like I don't go, Brad, like my design's so much better than yours. Like I'm definitely gonna win this competition, but it is like rewarding for especially me and Austin in the office when these guys have been working for 10 to 15 years that like I'll put a concept up and it'll get chosen, or Austin will get, then it like you get a little bit of gratification that like, hey, like we kind of know what we're doing, or we have some design sense. So it's nice. I wouldn't call it a competition, but we definitely like it. It is rewarding to win some of them sometimes, or be chosen. I shouldn't say win.
Well, if we don't have any more questions for you, Bennett, at this time, I think we're going to move on to the next person, and that's Alex. But thank you for that bit of information. And like I said, you guys, if you have any questions for Haley or Bennett, just type them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But Alex, I will let you take it away.
Sure. So I had a pretty unique opportunity this summer. I guess a little background, the end goal for me would be to design golf courses, and the landscape architecture major was kind of a prerequisite into some of the bigger firms, the golf course architecture firms, what I'm talking about. So I spent my summer working for Bennett. They're based out of Buffalo, Minnesota, just right near the cities. And they are part of a bigger Bennett Incorporated. And what they do is they work with architects, and then they're ultimately the construction crew that puts their visions all together. And like I said, they're part of the bigger Bennett Incorporated company. That their main thing within that scope is more of a civil kind of residential building. I know they're doing a lot of highways and kind of streetscapes around the cities. But Bennett Golf is one of the smaller branches within that company. They have work going on all over the United States. I happen to spend my internship down in Dalton, Georgia. How I got connected with them is they had some work going on back in my hometown, which is Minot, North Dakota. And being kind of close family friends with the golf pro up there, I kind of got connected with him. And then he worked alongside the site manager at the time. So then I got connected with him, kind of went back to the project manager within the office. And then from there, we just kind of exchanged emails, and he just kind of asked me, what my end goal, kind of what I wanted to learn was from their company. And then it just kind of ran from there. And by the summer, I was driving down to Georgia. So this, I spent a lot of time being a laborer this summer, which I did find importance in, and I am glad that I had the opportunity. It sucked a little bit kind of in the hot Georgia, humid weather. I just did not want to be outside for the 12 hours a day. But like I said, I did find a lot of importance in seeing something being built from the ground up, seeing all the different materials that had to be used, why we use them, kind of seeing the horticulture side of it. This was a really big renovation of a golf course. So I got to see kind of the different types of grasses. They don't use the same type as here. Obviously, they have a little bit more temperate Bermuda grass that they use. And I got to see kind of, as you see in that picture there, they're on their way into the grow-in process. It was nice to see, because we did a lot of kind of construction detailing drawings last year in class, and this kind of really brought everything to life for me. And being able to be just like boots on the ground and seeing everything at the ground level was a really good, important experience. And I know that I'm going to be able to take that knowledge hopefully into an office with air conditioning come this next summer. So yeah, I would stress that it's at least nice to see the little bit more labor intensive side of what goes on in all the modeling, all the sketches and everything that you will be doing as you move forward.
I have a question for you. Was that, is that your, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I interrupted you. So the golf course, do they offer, because obviously like in our program, we don't do a lot of irrigation or water management or like turf management. So is that something that they, like if they have a landscape architecture prerequisite, does that company offer like education programs too for like, I don't know, where you'll be when you graduate? Or do you, I guess, do you know?
As far as the irrigation side of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were also a part of that. Thank you. I know I missed a ton of stuff here. So yeah, they do do irrigation work for it, and then as well as working alongside the architect for all the shaping and everything, they also had a separate irrigation designer that was a little bit more focused in that realm, and he was on site not as much as the golf course architect, but he was there to see everything over kind of in the start, in the middle, and the end of the project to make sure everything was set up, because obviously there's a lot that I didn't know stepping into this summer, and I got to learn a lot about just kind of the placement of everything and just how from one pump station, it's able to cover acres and acres of a golf course.
Alex, I have a question for you, and then something to mention. We do have a couple more slides of the pictures that you sent to me, so we can go through those too. But my question is kind of about like, what classes can you take maybe outside of our program that would help better prepare you? Are you like, did you take any horticulture classes, or did you take any irrigation management classes that you really discovered this summer were like really helpful? Or what kind of suggestions would you give to a student who also wants to do like golf course designing stuff?
Right. Okay. And go ahead and slide to any of the other pictures. They're just pretty pictures. But I took a capstone class that kind of went over a vast majority of the horticulture classes that we offer at NDSU. And what I would say is, I know there's an irrigation design course that would be pretty important to look into. There's a bidding and contracting course that would also be really helpful, because before I traveled down to Georgia, they brought us into the office in Buffalo, and we got with the guy who does all of the bidding and kind of breaks down all the costs that a job like this is going to take. And it was a process that it looked like it took him years and years to kind of perfect, and he's got all the numbers down in his head, and he kind of knows for like a 4-month project that's this big, so-and-so needs to happen. He kind of knows what those numbers need to be before he even gets the breakdown of what all needs to happen. So I would say bidding and contracting would be a good one to take. And then obviously like a turf grass class would be really important, because the superintendent on the golf course maintenances the golf course year round. He had a really good understanding of how things grew in. So he had a really good understanding of the whole turf grass scope of things, which is really nice for him to have, because we were able to consult him on questions that maybe we didn't know, being that temperate Bermuda grass is so unfamiliar to most of us that were from kind of the Midwest area.
Thanks for asking or answering that question. Sorry. Does anybody else have any questions for Alex? You can type them in the chat if you want, or you can unmute yourself right now. If not, we can go ahead. I think we still have one more picture. Yeah, here we go, this one. This is a good picture, I thought. So Alex, do you want to say anything else about your internship experience? It sounds like it was really fun, and being in Georgia, I feel like it was really warm.
It was super warm. I can kind of explain this picture because it kind of looks like they're just standing on lava rock. This is all just pea gravel, and what's going to go on top, this is going to be one of the bunkers, and so there's obviously going to be sand on top of it. All those little pieces of gravel, they told me that they couldn't be round because the drainage pipe, it would slip through little holes and it would clog up the drainage pipe. It couldn't be too big, otherwise it would fill in those little holes, or it had to be the right size. And then they're spraying a polymer on top of it to kind of mesh together and make it all one, so it's a walkable surface without it giving. And then, but it's going to be able for water to seep through it, so it'll seep through the sand, it'll seep through that gravel with the polymer coating, and then it'll go underneath to the drainage system, and then the water flow would shoot it off into some other direction. So that's what's going on there.
Wow, that's a lot going on. I feel like you learned a lot of really important stuff this summer. Okay, well, thanks, Alex, for sharing that. Yeah, you guys just go ahead and blow up the group chat we've got going on. Like, please ask as many questions as you think, like if they're funny or not, like it doesn't really matter. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about my internship that I had this summer. I moved down to Kansas City, Kansas for the summer. My partner lived down there, and so I, like Haley, I had sought to get an internship in that location. Well, not the same location, but similar concept. One of the very first projects that I got to work on was pretty much drafting an entire, like, oh my gosh, like revamp of a block of a parking lot. There used to be a building on here, and they demolished the building and they resurfaced the parking lot and redid a couple of the entries. So it wasn't like too super complicated, too super designy at all. I felt more like a civil engineer, to be honest with you. Like, I didn't really do a whole lot of design, but it was fun and it kind of made me feel smart. So on this plan to the left is one out of I think 14 construction documents that we submitted for this project. So this is the 11th one. But I don't know, this one was really interesting to me because I was reading in this certain city's code, it wasn't Kansas City, it was like a suburb, that there had to be one tree per every 2,500 square feet on a certain site or like a block of open space. And so it was kind of, I don't know, like we had to do a little bit of math to figure out how many new trees we needed to plant, how many trees we were keeping, where they were at. And so it was just like fun to figure that out. I like doing, I don't know, math and analytical stuff. That was kind of fun, but it was also challenging because we were keeping some curb, but we were demolishing some, and then we were rebuilding some of it. So I had to go through, and there was like an entry on the south side here where I had to be like, okay, this dark line we're keeping, this light line we are installing a new curb, and then the dark line we're keeping. So it was like really confusing, and I had to be pretty like meticulous with what I was doing, because for somebody like a contractor to be reading this, they need to figure out like what are we keeping and what are we putting in and what are we totally taking out. So it was a process that I had to like really think through. And then this one up here, you can't really see it that well, but like these giant sections on the block, we basically squared them off into where the water was draining in each of these sections. So like this bottom right one, the water is draining in a certain, like off to the street or whatnot. And then, so we showed what the old one, like the old plan had, and then the proposed plan and how we are controlling the runoff so it doesn't like I don't know, overflow certain portions, and just so we can like really make sure the intake is controlled for the environment, etc. Yeah, I'm gonna move on to the next one. So this is a master plan that I did in Kansas. I worked on it with a coworker. I didn't do the entire thing, but started in AutoCAD, took it to Illustrator, but I also brought in lines from GIS. And so that was like really cool that I got to figure out, oh my gosh, this is like the city's main water pipe here. And if this site here, like if you, I don't know, read the legend, this is the development right in here. If they want to be annexed by the cities, they're really close to the city, they're going to have to connect to right over here in this corner and bring it all the way up here. And this is like a 400-acre site, so it's literally just going to go right, I don't know. Yeah, there's just like a lot of political, environmental, like engineering that I got to talk about. And it was really cool because I was like, wow, like because of, I don't know, this person's LEED certified, you can't, I don't know, run a huge pipe across that much land. It's going to ruin a lot of it. But another cool thing about this site is we got to visit it, and then we actually found some native, like virgin prairie, which means that like this land has never been farmed before, it's never been built on before, it like literally has never been touched. And there was like a couple different like Native American burial grounds along this site, so a lot of it was like, let's not annex this part because this is like preserved land, this is like very rare, we want to keep it that way. So we basically suggested new areas to develop if they want to expand this business, and then how they're going to be able to connect with their new utilities, and when they expand, where they shouldn't expand, which is in that native grass area, and then a couple different like trails. But we had like 10 or 12 of these different plans. That's why there's just so much going on, because we had some layers turned on and some turned off. But this is what we proposed to the client, and we had asked like these questions up here, and yeah, it was a really good experience to like actually talk with the client, see what they wanted and how they decided it as a business. And then I'm gonna get to those questions after I talk about this last project. This is a project that I am currently working on because I continued my internship throughout the school year, and it's a park in Missouri, and it's actually really cool. They have this walking bridge that goes all the way up from this parking ramp to the center of the park down here, but we have to be really careful because this piece of land floods a lot because it's near the Missouri River, and so it kind of turns into an island at some points, and so we have to be kind of like meticulous and careful about like how we design it. So we've just been in the concept phase and creating concept boards, just like how you do in Jay's studio or Dominic's. Like we've all done it before in class. So this is basically what we did. I just threw some ideas together that we had. But yeah, there's some sketches. There's a couple of riverfront ideas that we're trying to include. This is a pavilion design that I did. So with this, it's kind of unique because we don't necessarily have like a budget for it, but it's kind of like however much money we decide to like make this project worth, the more we have to help fundraise. So it's like, you don't totally want to be like, oh, let's have the most expensive things ever. But yeah, that's kind of just a short overview of this. And then I'm gonna look at the group chat. So yeah, did I work with any hydrology modeling? I didn't, well, yeah, yes and no. So like the person I was working on this project with, oopsies, I'll go back. She was doing the grading, and so she did most of the calculations, and I did most of like the layout stuff of everything. But we did do those like calculations that we did in our site detailing class last year. So that was like really cool and really helpful. I don't know if that answers your question. Do I think that NDSU technology courses properly prepared you for the caliber of drafting you were expected to complete? Or were there lots of technology that you were learning throughout your time at Bartlett and West? So that's a really good question. I thought that I was well prepared. I knew how to do a lot of these things that they were asking me to do, but I didn't know how to do them the Bartlett and West way. I feel like every firm that you go to, you kind of have to relearn how to use your program because they all have different ways of filing things and saving things and using different blocks and using different, I don't know, fonts and stuff like that. I actually didn't even work in AutoCAD. I worked in Civil 3D. So I don't know, it didn't even seem any different than AutoCAD. And then can you further elaborate on your experience on doing an internship during school? Is that something that is difficult to manage with the full course load? This is my first semester ever doing it, and I wouldn't have done it any other semester because I was taking too many credits. And then Haley asks, do you have one main mentor / supervisor, or are you more self-led? What was that dynamic like? I didn't have a mentor or supervisor. I always sought out, like, I always went and asked people, hey, can I job shadow? Hey, can I contact you? Like, can we go out for lunch? Like, and it would always be in Kansas City. So I worked really, really hard, and I was just like, my go-to would be like, hey, can I job shadow? I job shadowed at a couple different firms in Kansas City, and one of them happened to offer me an internship. And so, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I can talk about at Confluence, or I guess at Land Elements. Before I started working there, I'd spent, like I said, I had a lot of conversations with Dominic, like after studio or other times, not at school. And then when I first got hired by him or them, he was kind of it's hard to say because he only worked in the summer like 4 hours a week. So for 4 hours, he was my mentor, or really like helped me do some stuff. But I kind of now at Confluence, being that we only have 4 people, there's like a main person that we all report back to, a office principal, and he's kind of taken over that role because with that small of a firm, you have to be able to like teach and review projects at the same time. So if we have a question or anything like that, he goes, becomes both of those people. He teaches us how to do stuff, and then he also reviews it. So I can maybe answer your question, Ben, about working during school and being an internship, because I worked there fully not full time, but I worked during the school year last year and this year. And Confluence, thankfully, is super flexible. I give them my school schedule, and then they ask for 10 to 15 hours a week, and then I get to pick when they are. So I go to studio Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to noon or 9 to 12:30, and then I work the rest of the day at Confluence on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you have to be careful though when you I don't know what to say, not volunteer, but give them that many hours, because if your school workload gets overloaded, they, at least in terms of professional production, like you can't be like, hey, this is late. Like that doesn't happen. So you really have to be careful about what you're working on. Sometimes I get caught or get in trouble maybe working on stuff for work here, but that's because that needs to get done. And it's it's doable. You just have to balance it a little bit. I like it because I get um, influenced by the academics and professional at the same time. So that's just my contribution to that question, I guess.
Alex, do you have anything to say, anything to add to that answer at all?
Yeah, as far as like a mentor, I followed around the project manager on site, and so I learned a lot from him. And then the golf course architect was on site once, if not twice, every week. So he had a lot of stuff going around the area, so he would just travel from site to site, whatever he was closest to. And so I spent a little bit of time with him and just kind of walking around. He would do a lot of manipulating just on site. Even after he had the plans all written out and given to us, he would make some changes just as he saw them as he was walking around the golf course. So that's who I got to follow around this summer.
I think that's like really good experience to have a mentor that's like in your field, like working with you. That's kind of the experience that I had too. Just to add on to that, my firm that I'm working for, not my firm, the firm that I'm working for is mostly an engineering firm. And so I would say my first mentor, she is like working to be a landscape architect, but my actual boss, he's an engineer. He's a civil engineer. And so like a lot of the projects that I get to do are more like this, what I'm showing. They're not less design, but kind of more math, more following what the city wants. And they might not be super elaborative projects, but they make money and we get to work on them. And, you know, like you kind of have to have a balance of like, okay, what's like super pretty and then what's super like just kind of more practical, more everyday, more, I don't know, more engineering than what we do in school. And I think maybe we can end on a question is, Haley, did you, I know you and I had a private conversation talking about working with engineers. Can you speak on that a little bit? And I'm going to go to the last slide so we can just wrap it up here.
Yeah, sure. So I guess it was interesting what engineers were really excited to work with landscape architects and which ones were kind of like, okay, now make it, like I did all the work, now make it pretty. Not that it was definitely more all the conversations I have had just anywhere with engineers is much more like, okay, let's like collaborate, like let's make a good project. I really enjoyed working at a firm or interning at a firm that had engineers in office, where from a business standpoint, we're like on the same team, right? Like we kind of play the same role for the client, which is like design services, right? Like that's, I mean, I think they call it different things, but because I'm hypothetically sitting in the same office or at the same table as the engineers, and we're kind of a team versus like working with engineers outside of your office that might be, I don't know, people you don't know as well, like building those personal relationships, I think made a difference when even just listening to the engineers and landscape architects talk to each other. I do think the younger engineers generally are more open-minded. That seems like predictable, but yeah, that was kind of my experience was overall good. But I think a large part of that good experience was being in the same office and engineers that like often work with landscape architects and like go out to lunch or to work events or social things with landscape architects. They had like kind of a different perspective that was much more like understand. I don't know. I feel like landscape architecture is hard to describe because it's so broad. So working along engineers that kind of understand what where we can be a strength to a company was something that was exciting, but what isn't something I've always heard. So yeah, I don't know if that's, I feel like we talked for a long time. I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I really enjoyed that. And that's something I was trying to pursue too. Like, okay, I want to be able to speak engineer language. Like I will be working with engineers. What do they like about landscape architects and what are they not? Because I know landscape architects that say all those engineers, you know, like what are those dynamics like? So peeking into that was definitely part of my experience, which is interesting.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. I feel like that's really helpful. Thank you for that. For now, I think that's kind of it. Unless anybody has any more last minute questions. Oh, I see Andrew has a question. And I see golf course, so I'm thinking, Alex, this might be one for you. I'm just going to mention this page that we're on right now. These are all of the students in our program that have or had an internship, and then their emails are there. Everybody, like if you have any questions for anybody, we just touched the surface on all of our internships. I'm sure we could talk about them for like days. So if you have any other questions about anything, like feel free to reach out to us. I put our emails in here. They're not on this page or any of these other people. They're from all over. And then Alex, I'll just let you address that.
Yes, I think it would be one of their kind of questions that they asked me before they hired me was kind of what's your background in working on a golf course, and I had done it for just as a summer job during school 3 years prior. And then let's see, what was the second part of that? And then yeah, when I got to the site, the golf course architect had his own intern walking alongside him. And then, so I kind of talked to those two about their experience in that. And then Dunnick, the project manager that was kind of above everything, he said they mostly have construction manager majors come through, but the last 6 landscape architects, they've turned 4 over to a golf course architect for an internship. So they have a pretty good turnover just by ways of connection within that that job.
Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. I feel like that's really helpful. Yeah, any more last minute questions, go ahead and put them in the group chat. Otherwise, like I said, contact us. We'll be more than happy to help anybody that has any questions. But as for now, I'd just like to thank all of you for joining the meeting and presenting. And I'd like to thank you for taking an hour out of your Wednesday evening and joining us for this. We really appreciate it here at ASLA. Yeah, thank you guys for doing that. And then I'm just gonna let Ben share some last minute announcements, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abby. You did a fantastic job putting this together. And again, thank you to all the students who came. I know this is going to be very helpful for review for people who want to listen to it like a podcast. And I can speak, you know, as a third year, it was incredibly helpful for me. I'm going to be looking for an internship this next year. And yeah, as far as announcements, the only thing that we have coming up is next week, next Friday, the 18th, is parking day. And I have a ton of stuff planned. I'm going to be working with all of you officers this next week, so we can get some emails out about that and get that finalized. So yeah, I'm really excited. So you'll have an awesome rest of your evening, and I'll see you around studio.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.